Watching Marjorie's films again has awoken memories in Gemmell he thought he'd lost forever. The most poignant for him are of his school days spent with his brothers at Sedbergh in Cumbria. Every year the school took part in a 10-mile cross-country race, which is still run today. And every year Marjorie would always be there to film the boys when they were running.
The boys lined up by houses, the 7 houses, and in the narrow street here. And then the starter started standing on the wall there and started them off, and they went straight up here with the cars with cameras and things ahead of them, and continued on this road for just over a mile until they turned down a lane on the left, which is called 10-Mile Lane. At that point the cars dropped off and the boys went on without any bother of cars or anything, traffic of any kind.
It's quite an arduous run across this sort of terrain. Did you train for it? Was a lot of training went on in advance?
The ones that thought they were going to do well and the ones that other people thought were going to do well did a lot of training. But it wasn't intended as a competitive thing. The idea was to enter, to take part. And the ones coming at the end got the biggest cheers.
More than 30,000 feet of Marjorie's film remains today. But of all the footage, there's one sequence coming up which reveals her keen eye for the unusual. What you're seeing is her record of a simple family holiday to Germany. Marjorie had taken her nephews, Gemmell and Stuart, for a cruise down the Rhine. But this soon turned into a more sinister event. The year is 1934, and the usual sightseeing trips are soon forgotten, as the family has a fateful encounter with Hitler and the Nazis at the historic Nuremberg rally.
It was when we were there that we had this frightening experience of seeing what really seemed to be going on. And there were field kitchens going everywhere, thousands of troops all being gathered up for the gathering, for the rally, and being subjected to all sorts of political speeches.
Like most people in Britain, the family spent the next few years in preparation for war. The Alexander boys joined their school officer training corps. It's 1939 and war is coming, and Marjorie is once again filming children in the garden of her house in Heswall. Only this time, it's a group of evacuees. A few weeks later, and there's a more poignant celebration for Marjorie to record, Gemmell's 21st birthday party. It was the last time the family would ever all be together, for a tragic sequence of events is about to overwhelm them. Gemmell soon found himself being sent to France.
I was posted up to the 51st Highland Division, but by the time I got up north a bit, I discovered that they were surrounded. In fact, I couldn't get to them. And the French people around me said, "Your lot are leaving. All the ships and boats we can find are removing them, and you got left, chum." So I had to think what to do, and it was then that I thought, well, probably the best thing to do is to make my way to Nantes and see if my friend Anne-Marie could put me up for a bit.
This was the woman Gemmell turned to. She was the family's former governess, Anne-Marie. In the early 1930s, Anne-Marie had been taken on by Marjorie to help teach the children French. She became one of the family, accompanying them wherever they went. She features in many of Marjorie's films of this time. In 1938, she returned to France to get married and to live in Nantes, and the Alexanders are guests of honour. In an ironic twist, 2 years later, Anne-Marie saved Gemmell's life when he turned up on her doorstep on the run from the Germans.
She got a shock when I rolled up at her door, and she just pulled me quickly through the door and said, "Come in, come in." She said, "You don't know where you are with people here now. The Germans are in charge." And our French people don't know whether they should side with the new bosses or with the old, and you can't trust anybody. There was no one else in France that I knew to make for that haven. Well, I literally lived in her attic. I never came downstairs, and she fed me, she looked after me. It was a somewhat confined existence, but a safe one.
Back at home, Marjorie would spend her days waiting for any news. Gemmell was listed as missing in action. She continued to film, but with most of the family away, she had to concentrate on some of the more beautiful landscapes of the North West and North Wales. Gemmell escaped back to England on a Polish trawler, but was then sent to North Africa and joined Montgomery's staff. He was only a mile away from his brother Stuart at El Alamein when tragedy struck.
Unfortunately, when he moved forward with a load of his chaps, he ran off the track into a minefield, and he got out of his vehicle to direct the driver to drive the vehicle back over its tracks to get it out of the minefield. But by sod's law or some misfortune, the truck had gone over a mine going in and not exploded. But when they came back over it, it did explode, and it killed my brother, and only did minor damage to the chaps, the lads in the truck.
For Marjorie, the films she'd taken of Stuart as a child and growing up now took on a new meaning for her.
Of all the footage that I've seen, there's one scene that stands out from everything else, and that's the scene of Stuart, the young boy, walking down Holyhead Breakwater. And if you look, he's just walking down, he's got his back to you, and he's like a small dot going off in the distance. And then he just turns around. It's as if he knows you're watching him. And I think, yeah, maybe he knows we're all watching his films today.
Marjorie would never really get over Stuart's death. But after the war, with the remaining Alexander children leading lives of their own, she decided to devote the rest of her life to helping others. She became a leading political figure on Wirral and even funded a hall and centre for the local community. But she never lost her passion for the Kodak camera. Throughout the 1950s, she continued to film the Alexander children with their own growing families. As the 50s turned into the 60s, she also spent time travelling the world. This isn't China, however. It's on the set of the Ingrid Bergman film, The Inn of the Sixth Happiness at Bethgelert in North Wales in 1957. And these are some of the last films she ever took. They're of holidays she spent in New Zealand, a country she fell in love with in the 1960s. Marjorie died over 20 years ago, bringing to a close an extraordinary family saga.
It's marvellous to recall these wonderful happy times and happy things one did all through this filming. It's reopened a past I would never have known or never remembered at all. You go through all that happiness, but then you're looking forward, and you're not going to be backward looking. You're positive and looking forward. And then you to be reminded of those wonderful times you had. And people who've now gone. And yeah, it's great.
Love is the sweetest thing What else on earth could ever bring such happiness to everything as love's old story? Love is the strangest thing, no song of birds upon the wing shall in our hearts more sweetly sing than love's old story.